Ladies and gentlemen, most people assume leadership begins when others start following you, when you're given a title, handed authority, or placed at the front of the room. But that's not where it starts. Leadership begins in a much quieter place. It begins internally with the decision to take responsibility for yourself, your thoughts, your actions, and your purpose. Before you can ever influence another person, you must first lead the person in the mirror. That's the part most people overlook. They chase influence, but neglect the inner work. They want to inspire others, but haven't yet inspired themselves. The truth is, the hardest person you'll ever have to lead is you, because leading yourself requires honesty. It requires the willingness to admit when you're wrong, when your ego is too loud, or when your insecurities are running the show. That's why leadership begins with self-awareness, not confidence. Confidence without self-awareness is just arrogance in disguise. But when you're aware of your tendencies, your flaws, your strengths, and your values, you create a foundation of trust not just with others, but within yourself. Leading yourself also means showing up even when no one's watching. It's how you carry yourself in the quiet moments, when the applause is gone, when the progress is slow, when the outcome is uncertain. Do you still show up then? Do you still choose to stay disciplined, to stay kind, to stay anchored in your values? Because if your behavior is only excellent when there's an audience, then it's not leadership, it's performance. And people don't follow performers, they follow people who are consistent, people who are authentic. People who have done the hard, invisible work of shaping who they are on the inside. This is why personal accountability matters more than charisma. You can be charming, talented, and well-spoken, but if you can't follow through on your own principles, none of it will last. Leading yourself means doing the work even when you don't feel like it. It means creating systems that keep you aligned with your values, even when your emotions try to pull you off course. And that kind of discipline isn't glamorous, it's rarely recognized, but it's the seed from which real leadership grows. You cannot shortcut this process, you cannot outsource this responsibility. You don't become a leader because you got promoted. You become a leader when you stop outsourcing blame, when you take full ownership of your choices, your growth, your impact. That's when the shift happens. That's when you move from being managed by life to leading in life. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Not easier, but more authentic, because leadership that starts from within doesn't fade, it doesn't depend on followers. It leads with or without applause. If you want to lead others well, the first step is simple. Lead yourself relentlessly. The rest will follow. Most people are waiting for the feeling to arrive before they act. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel strong. They wait to feel like a leader, but leadership isn't a feeling, it's a skill. And like any skill, it must be trained, not assumed. The people we admire, the ones who stand tall in times of chaos, didn't get there by chance. They trained for it. They built the mindset long before the crisis showed up. They chose to develop the muscles of patience, clarity, and conviction when no one else was watching. Training your mind like a leader isn't glamorous. It's not about reading motivational quotes or repeating affirmations. It's about showing up to the hard conversations. It's about questioning your assumptions. It's about building habits that align with your values even when it would be easier not to. Leaders aren't born with mental toughness. They earn it, day by day, choice by choice. They learn to regulate their emotions, not because they're cold or calculated, but because they've trained themselves to stay grounded in what matters most when emotions are high. It's easy to lead when everything is going your way. It's easy to be calm when there's no pressure. But leadership is tested in adversity, and the way you prepare for those moments is through repetition. Through building the mindset that doesn't flinch at discomfort, that doesn't crumble when uncertainty shows up. You don't just become decisive, composed, or disciplined. You train those qualities, and you train them like any other skill, with practice. That's the difference. Great leaders don't rely on inspiration to take action, they rely on discipline. They don't hope for mental strength, they build it. They rehearse the thoughts they want to lead with. They remove the beliefs that no longer serve them. They treat mindset like a system, not a mystery. They know that you can't lead with clarity if you've filled your mind with noise. So they prioritize stillness. They create space to think, because they understand that their greatest tool isn't their voice, it's their mind. And that training, it doesn't happen once. It's not a weekend workshop. It's daily. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it feels like no progress is happening at all. But over time, it compounds. Your ability to stay calm in chaos increases. Your ability to focus when others are distracted sharpens. And when the storm hits, and it always does, you don't need to scramble. You don't need to pretend. You just lead, because you trained for this. Leadership is not about being extraordinary all the time. It's about preparing consistently so that in the moments that matter, you can rise not because of adrenaline, but because of alignment. Because you've done the work. Because you've trained your mind not just to think, but to think like a leader. That's the difference. That's the edge. That's how great leadership is forged. There's a quiet trap many fall into on the path to leadership. The chase for approval. The temptation to please, to fit in, to be liked. It feels safe. It feels rewarding. And for a moment, it even feels like leadership. But real leaders don't chase applause. They chase purpose. The difference is massive. One is rooted in fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of criticism. Fear of standing alone. The other is rooted in clarity, a deep understanding of why you do what you do, and a commitment to never compromise it, no matter the cost. When you lead for popularity, your decisions will always be reactive. You'll shift your direction based on what's trending. You'll silence your voice when it becomes uncomfortable. And over time, you'll lose your sense of identity, not because you don't care, but because you care too much about what everyone else thinks. That's not leadership, that's performance, and people can feel the difference. Purpose doesn't shout. It doesn't need validation. It's quiet, steady, unshakable. Purpose gives you a filter, something to run every decision through. Not will they like me, but is this aligned with what I believe? Not what will get me ahead, but what will serve others in a meaningful way. And that shift changes everything. Because when your actions are grounded in purpose, you become consistent. People know what you stand for, even when it's not popular. Especially when it's not popular. There's something magnetic about someone who isn't swayed by the crowd. Someone who walks their own path, not with arrogance, but with integrity. That's what inspires, not the loudest voice in the room, but the most grounded one. And that kind of roundedness only comes from being deeply rooted in purpose. The world will always try to pull you away from it. There will be rewards for compromise. There will be shortcuts that seem harmless. There will be moments when staying true to what matters most feels costly. But the price of popularity is often your authenticity. And the truth is, you can't lead effectively if you're pretending to be someone you're not. People don't follow perfection, they follow truth, and truth is found in purpose, not in image. So ask yourself daily, am I doing this because it's right or because it's popular? Am I making this choice because it's aligned or because it's safe? The more you choose purpose over popularity, the stronger your leadership becomes. Not louder, stronger, not flashier, deeper. The goal isn't to be liked by everyone, it's to be trusted by the right ones. And trust is built through consistency, not popularity, through courage, not convenience, through purpose, not performance. When you lead from that place, your leadership doesn't just get notice, it gets remembered, and more importantly, it creates change that actually matters. In moments of stress, when pressure builds and uncertainty creeps in, most people react. They lash out, retreat, panic, or rush into decisions they later regret. But leadership demands something different. It requires you to resist that first impulse, to slow down when everything in you wants to speed up, and to respond with intention instead of emotion. That's not instinct. It's discipline, and it doesn't happen automatically. It's something you train for, moment by moment, until response becomes your default and reaction becomes a thing of the past. There's a massive difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is emotional, immediate, and often fueled by fear or ego. It's the defensive email sent too fast, the argument that escalates unnecessarily, the quick decision that satisfies in the short term but creates damage in the long run. Response, on the other hand, is thoughtful. It's rooted in clarity. It takes into account the bigger picture. Responding doesn't mean you're slow. It means you're intentional. It means you choose direction over distraction and strategy over impulse. This kind of thinking separates great leaders from everyone else. While others get pulled into the chaos, leaders create space to think. They understand that emotion is a signal, not a strategy, that just because something feels urgent doesn't mean it is. They learn to pause, to breathe, to reflect, because in that space between trigger and action is where leadership is forged. And that space isn't always easy to find. It takes awareness, it takes practice, it takes the willingness to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. But that pause, that slight delay before speaking, before choosing, before acting, is where the real power lies. It's in that moment that you decide whether to contribute to the noise or create clarity within it. One of the most underrated leadership skills is composure, not silence, not suppression, but composure, the ability to stay grounded when others are spinning. When you can respond instead of react, you build trust. People begin to see you as stable, reliable, centered, not because you have all the answers, but because you don't crumble under uncertainty. You create calm. You hold space. You show others what it looks like to lead with thought, not just feeling. And this isn't about perfection. You'll get it wrong sometimes. You'll react. We all do. But the key is learning from it, becoming aware of the triggers, building tools that help you pause next time, because the more you practice responding, the more natural it becomes. You stop being at the mercy of your mood. You stop letting circumstances dictate your leadership. You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. You set the tone rather than reflect it. That's what leadership demands, not flawless decision-making, but thoughtful presence, not reaction, but response. That one habit, learning to pause, can transform the way you lead, the way you live, and the way others experience you. We often look at leaders and admire their presence, their clarity, their ability to command attention without saying much. But what we don't always see is the work behind the scenes, the habits, the self-discipline, the inner standards they uphold when no one's watching. Leadership isn't built in public. It's built in private. The strength that shows up on stage is the result of choices made in silence. The confidence you admire is often the outcome of thousands of small, unseen moments where someone chose discipline over ease, integrity over shortcuts, consistency over comfort. Leadership is not just about what you say to others. It's about what you say to yourself. It's the way you think when you're tired, the way you act when you're frustrated, the way you respond when no one will know the difference. Because those moments count. In fact, those moments are everything. They shape your identity. They define your character. And character isn't something you turn on like a light switch when responsibility shows up. It's something you build, layer by layer, through the habits you create. The greatest leaders don't wait for the big stage to practice being who they are. They rehearse integrity in the smallest choices. They do what they said they would do, even when no one's keeping track. They set personal standards that aren't based on external pressure, but on internal purpose. That's how trust is built, from the inside out. People follow those who are dependable, not just visible. And here's what makes it challenging. No one claps for the work done in private. No one celebrates the quiet decisions that no one sees. But that's what makes it powerful, because in the absence of applause, in the absence of recognition, you find out who you really are. Are you still disciplined when it's inconvenient? Are you still ethical when no one's looking? Do you still show up with excellence, not because someone's watching, but because you refuse to settle for less? It's easy to look good once. It's hard to be consistent every day. But consistency is what builds credibility. And credibility is the currency of leadership. Without it, you're just making noise. With it, you earn something far more valuable than attention. You earn trust. You don't need a crowd to validate your standards, you need a commitment to yourself. Because in the long run, it's not the flashy moments that define a leader. It's the quiet ones. The ones where you choose to keep going, stay true, hold the line, the ones where you could cut corners but choose not to. That's where leadership is built, not in front of an audience, but in the quiet discipline of everyday choices. And when those private habits become who you are, something powerful happens. You stop performing leadership and start being a leader. Effortlessly, authentically, from the inside out, every leader carries a mission. Whether they know it or not, whether it's spoken out loud or kept within, there's always something deeper driving the choices they make. And the mission doesn't begin with a business plan or a vision board, it begins in the mind. Your mindset is the soil in which your mission either grows or dies. It shapes how you interpret challenges, how you handle setbacks, and how you inspire others. That's why training your mind isn't just about self-improvement. It's about protecting the integrity of your mission. If your mindset is filled with fear, scarcity, and doubt, those emotions will seep into your decisions. You'll hesitate when you should act. You'll shrink when you should stand up. You'll compromise when you should hold firm. A weak mindset turns meaningful missions into wasted potential, not because the goal wasn't worthy, but because the person behind it wasn't prepared mentally to carry it. On the other hand, a clear and grounded mindset becomes the foundation for everything you build. When your thinking is rooted in purpose and clarity, your leadership reflects it. Your mission becomes resilient, not because circumstances are easy, but because your inner world is stable. That's what separates leaders who last from those who fade out. It's not luck or even talent. It's mental preparation. It's the intentional choice to shape your thinking in a way that strengthens your mission, not sabotages it. And shaping your thinking takes work. You have to guard your inputs, what you read, what you watch, who you surround yourself with. You have to challenge the voice in your head that says you're not ready, you're not enough, or someone else could do it better. You have to replace noise with focus, insecurity with courage, and distraction with discipline, because your mind will either fuel your mission or fight it. That's why the strongest leaders are the most self-aware. They don't just know what they want to build, they know what could get in their way. Not external obstacles, but internal ones, the fear of failure, the need for control, the temptation to please. They confront those patterns and actively reshape them, not for perfection, but for alignment. They know that when their mind is aligned with their mission, they become unstoppable, not in force, but in clarity. And clarity is contagious. When a leader has a focused mindset, the people around them feel it. It creates confidence. It creates direction. It gives others something to believe in, not just because of what's being said, but because of the conviction behind it. That kind of conviction doesn't come from hype. It comes from a well-trained mind committed to a meaningful mission. So if the mission matters, and it always does, train your mind like it matters too. Because everything you lead, everything you build, everything you fight for will either rise or fall based on the strength of what's happening inside your head. Leadership doesn't start with strategy. It starts with mindset, always.